Welcome to Building Bulletproof Brands. Before we get into today's module, I want to ask you something. What if every single time you posted, your video got over 100,000 views? Like really, what if no matter what you posted, you had 100% certainty that that video is going to get 100,000 views every single time at the very, very least? A better question is, what would that do for your business? Or how much money could you make? In today's module, we're going to be building the foundations needed to turn that into a reality. And coming from someone who has actually made this a reality, I can promise you that if you take the time to actually understand and grasp what I'm about to give you in this module, you will build an audience that is addicted to your content and will pay you dividends for the rest of your life. In today's module, we're going to go over how to train your audience to become addicted to you and your content. And to begin, I'm going to give you a mental model to wrap your head around whenever it comes to creating content. About a year ago, I remember reading an article by a guy named Tom Hale. And in this article, he made a really interesting correlation between humans and B.F. Skinner rats. Now, if you're not familiar with the name B.F. Skinner, he was an American psychologist back in the 1940s. And he was a huge believer in the concept named operant conditioning. Operant conditioning is based on the idea that we can increase or decrease a certain behavior by adding a consequence. For example, if your dog takes a shit on your carpet, you can either A, provide positive reinforcement so that the dog does it again, or B, you can provide a negative punishment so that the dog will stop and never do it again. Both reinforcement and punishment can either be positive or negative. So to put this concept to the test, B.F. Skinner held the Skinner box experiment. Long story short, he gathered a bunch of starving rats and placed them into two different boxes. One box being the positive box that was meant to build positive reinforcement around the lever, and the other box being a negative box meant to build negative reinforcement towards the lever. So to begin this experiment, he placed a rat in the positive reinforcement box. And we're going to call this rat Bobby. So in this box, there was a lever and a food dispenser that dispensed food whenever the lever was pulled. So when the starving rat named Bobby got dropped into this box, he naturally started running around looking for a way to escape. And eventually, Bobby ended up accidentally pulling on this lever. And when he did, food fell from the dispenser. So obviously, whenever the starving rat noticed this, he continuously pulled on the lever to get more food. This is called positive reinforcement. But where Skinner got some bad rep is whenever he introduced the negative reinforcement to Bobby. So after Bobby built up some positive reinforcement to the lever, B.F. Skinner moved Bobby into the other box, being the negative reinforcement box. And this is where Skinner got some bad rep. In this box, Skinner would introduce an electrical shock to Bobby that can only be stopped by pulling the lever. So naturally, whenever Bobby began to get fucking shocked, he started running and jumping around the box trying to find a way to escape, up until the point where Bobby landed on the lever, which stopped Bobby from being shocked. Now, as the process of Bobby getting shocked and having to jump on the lever kept happening over and over and over again, it got to a point to whenever Skinner would enter the room and turn on the light, Bobby would automatically jump on the lever to prevent the electrical currents from even turning on. This is called negative reinforcement. All of this to say, I want you to look at my profile. As you can see, at the time of recording this, I have 320,000 followers. And when you look at my video's views within the past 365 days, I average out at 311,000 views per video. That kind of ratio is pretty much unheard of. But if you were to take a look at others with similar followings, for example, Ryan Pineda, the average view count is like 30,000, but he has 420,000 followers. And you see that with most big accounts nowadays. And why is that? Of course, some of it has to do with the amount of time that the account has been around for. If you have followers from around 4 years ago, either they're probably sick of you or they just might not even use Instagram anymore. But I would argue that most of it just has to do with behaviors being conditioned with reinforcements. My followers know whenever a light-skinned kid with a mop-style haircut pops up on your screen, even if you don't want to watch the video, you know based on past reinforcements that you will at least get something out of watching that video. Just like the rat named Bobby, the lever, and the food dispenser. Every single time that a viewer does not scroll and decides to watch my video, they get positively reinforced to watch another. Keep in mind, I pretty much only have 2 call to actions. Just comment Devin Zone and I'll send it over to you. It's to follow for more value. And by doing this, it's allowed me to build a big enough brand to where literally no matter what I post, that video will get 100,000 views. Now on the opposite side, if we take a look at Ryan Pineda's content, and also this is no hate to Ryan. I've done a podcast with Ryan, I've been to his events, blah, blah, blah. Ryan's a cool dude and right now he makes more money than me. His account was just a good example for me to use. Anyways, if you were to take a look at these videos, I want you to see on how unpredictable they are.
Is it worth spending $1,200 on some Louis Vuitton shoes versus just a good pair of Nikes? This is the credit card I used to buy my first house. Recently, one of my students gifted me an ube cream liquor. I'm 34 years old, and my entire life, I've never been able to grow anything close to resembling a beard. Here's why you don't want to be an influencer.
Now, not only are they unpredictable, I want you to listen to some of his call to action.
Give me the 10,000 people all day.
Now, don't get me wrong, this guy's killing it with his content. He's an OG within the space and has gone to great lengths to perform on social media. Although, you can visually see his presence start to slowly drift away. And the biggest reason on why I believe that his presence is drifting away is because of the uncertainty and value attached with the certainty of an ask. Right now, Ryan posts around 6 videos a day. 5 of those 6 are most likely some sort of podcast clip or thought dump, and the other one video typically does contain some sort of niche down value. However, it was made with the overall intention of selling you at the end of the video. So for 5 of the videos, I don't really know what I'm getting as the viewer. And the other one video that I do get that I know I'll get some sort of value out of just ends up being a setup for me to be sold, which will pretty much inevitably negatively reinforce me to skip past this video the next time that one pops up. Just like the rat named Bobby, the lever, and the electric field. Every time a video of his pops up and every time that a viewer decides not to scroll and decides to watch the video, they get negatively reinforced to watch another. And again, I'm not on Ryan's level. I can only teach you what's worked well for me and my clients. And also, one thing that I like to keep in mind whenever I'm consulting entrepreneurs on their content is that there are 3 levels to life. First, you get paid for what you do. Second, you get paid for what you know. And lastly, if you're lucky, you'll get paid for who you are. He's currently getting paid because of who he is, and his content and business results speak to that. There's not only one way to succeed on social media. Ryan and myself have shown that. I just prefer for my content to be undeniable. And the way that I found to do that is by giving my absolute best to creating a huge amount of positive reinforcement for my viewers to continue to want to watch my next video. In that process, I built a huge brand trying to achieve that. Now, before our full circle, I just want to go and add that I'm not saying that you shouldn't be trying to sell anything within your content. And I'm definitely not saying that you should never make an ask within your videos. Personally, I don't really give a shit about being famous, and I would also assume that you're on the same boat. So if you're like me, we just want to make more money. What I am saying is, when you only create videos with the intention of selling the viewer at the end of the video, pretty quickly, that'll negatively reinforce the viewer to pull on the scroll lever the next time that they see one of your videos. Now, you could make your video a fair exchange. But all that really does is just train the viewer to look for the positive over time and then begin to disregard the negative at the end of your videos. But when your positive to negative ratio is 9:1, that's when the negative, which is your ask, starts to transform into a positive in the viewer's eyes. Here's what I mean. I created this framework that I named 9 gifts and 1 guide. So what you do is you create 10 videos, and 9 of those videos are gifts to your audience. And by gifts, I just mean valuable videos that are created with the viewer's best interests in mind, positively reinforcing the viewer to continue to watch your content. By guide, I just mean making a valuable video like normal, but this time it's created with both of your interests in mind, giving your audience value to begin with, but also guiding your audience to take an action that you want them to take. Kind of like inviting them to take a look at your page shit, whether it's a landing page, whether it's a type form, or even a product page. If you are familiar with Gary Vee's jab, jab, right hook, this is pretty much jab, 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 right hook. And the reason I created and subscribed to the 9 gift and 1 guide is actually for 2 reasons. With reason number 1 being is that following this still allows me to build an ungodly amount of positive reinforcement around my videos while still cashing in every once in a while. And then number 2, outside of all the big reasons of wanting to give value to your audience, reasons like building goodwill, building trust with your audience, building authority within your niche, and just getting overall more engagement because of the nature of content, all of those reasons fall under the most important thing to me, at least whenever it comes to monetizing, is building perceived value towards whatever I decide to sell now or in the future. To me, perceived value is the most important thing whenever it comes to selling to your audience. When you think about it, all of us have a preconceived contrast in our minds that an individual's paid stuff is just automatically going to be better than the free stuff. So whenever you start giving away a bunch of good shit for free, it creates the perception of, well, if this is what he's giving out for free, then his paid shit just must be magnificent. So effectively, the quantity and quality of your gifts increases the perceived value of your paid products. And plus, as a bonus, it'll automatically decrease the perceived risk that comes with purchasing your product as well. Because if a consumer already knows that your shit is valuable, then in the customer's mind, it's already pre-assumed that your paid shit is also going to be valuable. So it just kind of eliminates the risk factor whenever it comes to buying your shit, which makes it extremely easy to sell your shit and make a shit ton of money for whenever it's time to introduce your guide. And because you gave out 9 gifts before you introduce your guide, the perceived perceived value to whatever your paid shit might be is already built up so high that assuming that your audience does have the problem that your product solves, and because you already gave them those 9 gifts before you introduce your guide, the perceived value to whatever you're about to sell in your guide is already built up so high to where assuming that your audience does indeed have the problem that your product solves, then your audience begins to kind of want to buy your shit. When you have that perceived value, it's no longer looked at as you trying to sell them. It starts to be looked at as you doing the viewer a favor. For example, if Alex Mosey DM'd you offering a one-on-one consultation for, let's say, 2 calls a week that are each an hour long, and he said it's only going to be $1,000 a month. Assuming that you already know who he is, you would not look at that message and be like, fuck, another guy trying to sell me a coaching program. I'd assume you'd be more like, is this even him? Or did he get hacked? Why is he offering this to me? This seems so cheap. Is this even real? If he ended up confirming that his offer was indeed real, then I would assume that you'd buy his coaching with no questions asked. Now, the only reason that you can look at someone taking your money as a good thing, or even go as far as saying that he's doing you a favor, is only because he's built up so much perceived value within his content that buying whatever he offers you really isn't a decision. It's just a no-brainer. And that is the goal of 9 gifts in 1 guide. Creating 9 videos with only the audience's benefit in mind and giving as much value as humanly possible. And then creating 1 guide, inviting your viewers that will happily give you their money at this point to work with you. And if that went over your head a little bit, then the best possible way I can explain these two is to look at them like sex. Just stay with me. Okay, so the gift is like your foreplay, and your guide is like the invitation to the bedroom. Your gifts slowly entice your viewers to want more of your free stuff, but not just that. And after a certain amount of gifts, then the viewer will start to want more. That's when you introduce the invitation to your product/service. The longer the foreplay, then the more likely of the individual saying yes to the invitation. The shorter the foreplay, then the less likely the individual will say yes to the invitation. And with no foreplay, then typically the bedroom isn't going to be enjoyable for anyone involved. By default, no one just hops on Instagram hoping to be sold by a random person they see online. And typically, most people don't want to sell someone who just doesn't want to be sold. It's just not an enjoyable experience for anyone. However, there's only so many gifts you can give a person until the desire and curiosity starts to really set in on what your product might be and how it can help them. And then what happens next is just a beautiful thing. All right, before this gets all weird and shit, we're gonna move out of this sex analogy and bring this module back to a full circle. At the beginning, I told you that I was going to teach you how to train your audience. You now know the difference between positive and negative reinforcement. This is how you're going to use them to train your audience. Conditioning happens in 3 steps, known as the ABCs of behavior. A stands for antecedent. The rat accidentally hits the lever that triggers the release of food. B stands for behavior, and it refers to the response of A. The rat keeps pressing the lever. And C stands for consequence. Food keeps coming out of the food dispenser. Now, the strength of the response to the conditioning depends on the schedule of reinforcement. If there's always food after pressing the lever, then the rat behaves predictably. If the food is released randomly, the rat behaves erratically, like an addict. And if the food dispenser stops giving food, the conditioned behavior will eventually disappear again. This is called extinction. So to translate the ABC of behaviors to content, the antecedent would be a viewer scrolls onto one of your valuable reels. Following the antecedent comes B, behavior. Impressed by the reel, the viewer explores your profile for more content, which leads to C, the consequence. Finding consistent value, the viewer follows you, anticipating future value. Now, the strength of the response depends on the schedule of reinforcement. If there's always value attached to your video, the viewer behaves predictably. If the video's value is uncertain, the viewer behaves erratically. And if you stop giving value in your videos, the anticipation of there being future value in your next video will eventually disappear. But if you continue to give value in your videos and the anticipation of value is constantly met, then that's when positive reinforcement is built. That's when you build a bulletproof brand. So, the next big question that most of you have right now, okay, Devin, I hear you. So, how do I create a valuable video? Looks like I'll see you in the next module.